Hey guys, tonight we drift into a world of ancient whispers and stifled ambitions, where dusty scrolls talk of emperors and sleepy soldiers, dream of unification beneath stars that haven't moved for millennia. You lie in the tall grass of a forgotten battlefield, the night air thick with the smoky echo of old wars, and the moon above slightly judging your lack of armor. Welcome to the Warring States period of China, where sleep is for the weak and betrayal is pretty much a bedtime ritual. The year is somewhere around 475 BCE. China, as you know it, doesn't exist. Instead, there are 7 major states and a bunch of minor ones, constantly arguing, fighting, and scheming. You'd think they'd agree on something like maybe just going to bed early. But no. Every duke and king wants the title of supreme ruler, and they're not above a little poison, a few fake alliances, or the occasional mass execution to get it. So here you are, smack in the middle of this chaos. You can't swing a bronze sword without hitting a self-important noble or a sweaty strategist drawing battle plans in the dirt. Everyone's hiring philosophers, legalists, and fortune tellers. One guy thinks Confucius has the answers. Another guy just burned his family's estate because a talking tortoiseshell said so. You honestly don't know who to believe anymore. In the East, the Qi state is showing off its scholars and thick books. In the South, the Chu people are channeling mysterious rituals and cryptic snake gods. And then there's Qin, way out in the western mountains, dismissed by the others as a bunch of backwards bumpkins who eat too much goat and don't speak proper Chinese. Joke's on them, though, because while everyone else is backstabbing their way into more problems, Qin is quietly sharpening its laws and its swords. Your feet ache from the endless marches, and your ears are tired of listening to generals shout across smoky command tents. But you're learning. You're seeing the patterns. Qin isn't winning hearts, but it's winning battles. And that counts for more when everyone else is too busy composing war poetry. You wander through the state of Wei, known for its military innovations. Some guy is building a canal to reroute armies. You pause in Han, where scholars debate morality while secretly hoarding grain. Over in Zhao cavalry, thunder across cold plains terrifying their enemies and probably their horses. And yet, they're all vulnerable. The fighting is constant, but none of these states are truly secure. Every alliance is temporary. Every peace treaty feels like a nap with one eye open. You even try to sleep one night near a neutral border, but wake to find the camp looted and your socks missing. Classic warring states. The people suffer most. Farmers are taxed until they cry rice. Blacksmiths forge weapons until their arms go numb. And children grow up playing execute the traitor instead of hopscotch. There's something deeply unsettling about seeing a 7-year-old pretend to be a warlord, but hey, it's historical immersion. Now, here's your first solid fact to file away this whole 250-year free-for-all eventually leads to the unification of China. But not by diplomacy or love or democratic elections. Oh no, it's Qin that ends up on top. And not through charm. Historians still argue whether Qin succeeded because of better strategy, sheer brutality, or just being in the right mountainous location to avoid early invasions. Some say it was legalism. Others credit reforms in agriculture and military ranks. Personally, you suspect it had something to do with the zero-tolerance policy for incompetence and the suspicious number of accidental deaths among rival ministers. But before we get ahead of ourselves, picture the battlefield from above. Thousands of tiny orange lanterns flicker like fireflies across the valleys. Horses breathe clouds of steam in the cold night air. and everywhere rulers stare into the dark, wondering who will betray them next. You feel the weight of the era press against your chest, not in fear, but in sheer exhaustion. These people didn't stop fighting, scheming, and planning for centuries. If you're tired now, just imagine living it. No naps, no weekends, and certainly no HR department to complain to. Yet somehow, amid the endless chaos, certain trends begin to emerge. Weapons become standardized. Armor improves. Fortresses grow more elaborate. Some say this is progress. Others just call it louder, bloodier failure. And then there's the fringe theory you overheard while sipping tea in a smoky tavern in Chu. A wiry old man with more eyebrows than teeth insists that an ancient lost state, not one of the seven, was pulling the strings from the shadows. A puppet master dynasty erased from the records. You nod politely, unsure if it's prophecy or just fermented yam hallucination. Still, the idea sticks with you. The Warring States era is often painted as chaos, but there's method beneath it. The Qin state way out west builds walls not for show but to keep out real threats. They rewrite laws to favor strength over birthright. And slowly, ruthlessly, they position themselves not just to survive, but to devour. Meanwhile, back in more civilized territories, kings throw extravagant parties with 300-course meals, chariots made of ivory, and dancers who probably just want to go home. You sneak into one of these affairs, drawn by the scent of roasted duck and awkward flute music, only to find the host assassinated by dessert. Honestly, you'd be more shocked if it didn't happen. And all the while, the people of Qin are farming, training, drilling. Their leaders speak less and act more. You visit one of their villages and find military practice woven into daily life, farmers turning into soldiers at the sound of a bell blacksmith's readying weapons next to their harvest. You don't see scholars lounging on silk cushions here. You see discipline. You see focus. You also see that they put chili in their soup, which is objectively too much, but you respect the commitment. The other states think Qin is barbaric. Qin thinks the other states are weak. One of them is right. You lie on a craggy hillside one dusk, listening to the drum beats of a distant skirmish. It's not a symphony, it's a warning. You hear that rhythm enough times, and you stop wondering when peace will come. You start wondering who will have the endurance to outlast the rest. Spoiler alert, it's the guys with the cold soup and the iron laws. But for now, just breathe in the ancient dust. Let your thoughts drift over war horses and weathered scrolls. This part of history is loud, tangled, and exhausting but necessary. It's the unstable prologue to something far more chilling order. So snuggle deeper into your metaphorical silk robes, because the next character in this story doesn't cry, doesn't blink, and definitely doesn't tolerate backtalk. His name is Ying Zheng, and he's about to be born. You're in the inner chamber of a Qin palace, stone walls echoing with the low hush of half-spoken secrets. Somewhere outside, the clang of bronze weapons mixes with the whimper of wind funneling through the valley. But inside, something strange is happening. Something historical. A baby has been born, and not just any baby. His name is Ying Zheng, and he will one day rename himself Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. But for now, he's just a surprisingly intense infant with questionable parentage and a nursery full of schemers. Here's the official version. He's the son of King Zhuangxiang of Qin and a low-ranking consort named Zhao Ji. But unofficially, oh, you'll love this. There's a juicy fringe theory that Ying Zheng might not be Zhuangxiang's biological son at all. Some historians argue he was actually fathered by Lu Buwei, a cunning merchant-turned-politician who conveniently placed Zhao Ji in the king's bedchamber right before she got pregnant. Suspicious timing, incredibly. Lu Buwei, by the way, is the type of guy who could sell you your own shoes. He rose from commoner to Chancellor of Qin, not by being noble, but by being very, very clever. And maybe by slipping a baby into the royal lineage. Historians still argue whether he orchestrated the entire affair as part of a long con to control the Qin throne through a puppet prince. If he did well, 10/10 for long-term planning. So baby Ying Zheng arrives in a world that already feels like a political trap wrapped in a royal diaper. He's given a soft silk cradle and an even softer target on his back. You can practically hear the palace walls whispering, "This one's going to cause problems." You watch as he grows not in freedom but in fear. The Qin court is a maze of rituals and manipulation. Eunuchs buzz around like overly helpful wasps, always smiling, always watching. They raise the boy, teach him etiquette, and probably remind him 10 times a day not to trust anyone, including them. Imagine being 10 years old and knowing that half the people in your life want to control you and the other half want you gone. No pressure, kid. He's tutored in history strategy law. Not the fun bedtime story kind of history either. The here's how we crushed our enemies and made their survivors pay taxes kind. You trail behind him in your slippers as he walks solemn palace corridors, learning the weight of 1,000 years of ambition pressed into one tiny spine. Outside, the world doesn't slow down. The other warring states still squabble and sabotage. But inside this strange little world of ritual and suspicion, Ying Zheng becomes sharp. Not kind, not warm, but dangerously focused. There's a moment when he's maybe 7 years old. A servant drops a tray of bronze cups near him. The noise shatters the silence. Everyone freezes. The boy looks at the man, not scared, not angry, just curious. The servant trembles, waiting for punishment. Ying Zheng says nothing, only stares. The silence lasts too long, and then calmly he walks away. It's chilling. Even the flies buzz more quietly around him after that. One of the first fringe tidbits you pick up as you sneak around the court, some servants say the boy has no shadow. Of course he does. You're not that tired, but the rumor spreads. A boy without a shadow. A future emperor born of secrets. It's the kind of eerie superstition that lingers in candlelit hallways and keeps the night guards very awake. As you hover behind the curtain of history, you can't help but notice something the people closest to Ying Zheng seem to disappear. Tutors retire early. Advisors fall ill. Guards get reassigned to faraway outposts and never return. It's like the air around him slowly tightens, drawing in only the loyal, the useful, and the silent. He becomes crown prince at a young age, but it's not a smooth transition. His father dies when Zheng is just 13. 13, which means he's technically king now, but of course everyone assumes someone else will rule in his place. You know, until he's old enough. That someone, surprise, it's Lu Buwei again. Officially named regent, he runs the state on behalf of young Zheng. And for a while, it works. Laws are passed. Campaigns are launched, but Zheng watches, learns, waits. Imagine being a teenager watching your maybe dad turned regent run the country you're supposed to rule. No wonder he grows up a little intense. You sneak into a high-level council meeting once. Lu Bui is charming everyone, and Ying Zheng sits silently on a stone chair, fingers steepled, like he's already plotting renovations to their tombs. You see a flicker of something in his eyes, not resentment exactly. Calculation. He's already thinking about how to take power back. Not with tantrums or rebellion, but with precision. One night, as the palace sleeps, you wander the dim halls and hear Zheng talking to himself. A list of names. You don't recognize them all, but you realize he's not reciting poetry. He's cataloging enemies. People who have crossed him. People who will not make it into the next era. Even now, historians debate whether his rise to full power was planned from childhood or born of desperation. Some believe Zheng was manipulated by Lu Bui until he couldn't take it anymore. Others argue he was always in control, biding his time behind a youthful mask. You stand in that hallway, listening to him mutter coldly through clenched teeth, and you think, yeah, this kid doesn't wait around by accident. The tension in the court grows. Lu Bui starts to lose his grip. A scandal breaks. Turns out he might have had a hand in placing another lover near the throne, orchestrating a web of seduction and distraction. You don't even blink anymore. It's just another Tuesday in ancient China. Eventually, Ying Zheng takes back full control. No dramatic coup, no bloodbath yet. Just a series of quiet firings, quiet exiles, and one day you look up and he's ruling alone. The boy has become a man, and not just a king, something else. You feel it in the way he walks through the palace now. Everyone steps back a little farther, bows a little lower, whispers a little softer. The days of puppetry are over. Zheng's rule begins in earnest. He's still in his 20s, but he's seen too much, trusted too few, slept too little. You can tell he doesn't see the throne as an honor. It's a tool, a necessary weapon, and with it, he intends to do what no one else has done in centuries: unify all of China. No pressure, but before he marches to war, before he rebrands himself with a shiny new title, you notice one last thing. He doesn't smile, not at victories, not at festivals, not even at the sight of fireworks blazing in the sky during the spring festival. He watches them flicker, arms, folded eyes, unmoved, like he's already calculating how to make fireworks more standardized, more efficient, maybe weaponized. You, meanwhile, are half asleep in a palace courtyard, head resting on a smooth stone. Crickets chirp, flags ripple, and far off in the deep heart of Qin, an empire stirs awake beneath the weight of one very determined young man. You wake with a jolt to the distant roll of war drums, slow, deliberate, like a heartbeat echoing through mountains. The Qin palace is quieter now, not because things are peaceful, but because the time for scheming has passed. The age of plotting behind screens is over. Ying Zheng, no longer a boy, no longer a puppet, is done waiting. You trail him in shadow, past carved pillars and taut-faced ministers. His robes sweep the stone like storm clouds. The council hall smells of ink, sweat, and nervous ambition. A large map stretches before him, lines scratched deep with charcoal, marking the borders of 6 rival states: Han, Zhao, Wei, Chu, Yan, and Qi. He doesn't blink at them. He simply says, it's time. You may want to buckle in, or at least adjust your pillow, because this isn't just war. This is surgical, relentless conquest. And you're watching the sharpest mind in ancient China wield an entire kingdom like a scalpel. First up, Han. Han is the weakest of the 6, practically asking to be conquered. Qin's army marches like clockwork. Their weapons are standardized, mass-produced in government forges with chilling efficiency. You step around crates filled with identical bronze swords, spearheads, and crossbow triggers. There's no chaotic scrambling for gear, no improvisation. Qin doesn't believe in improvising, they believe in winning. Han collapses quickly. Ying Zheng barely breaks a sweat. One down. You might expect a celebration. There isn't one. Just logistics. Orders barked through the halls. Troops rerouted. Supplies redirected. Zheng isn't here for glory. He's here for results. Next, Zhao. Now, this is trickier. Zhao's cavalry is legendary, forged by generations of war. The terrain is mountainous cruel. Soldiers have to scale cliffs and sleep on stone. You tag along freezing in your ill-prepared traveler's garb, watching Qin generals, most notably the ruthless Wang Jian, turn hardship into habit. It's not glamorous. It's not even fast. But slowly, Zhao buckles. One day, you sit on a snowy ridge and hear the cry of surrender echo across a valley. It's haunting, like the mountain itself is giving up. Zhao falls. Now, here's your historical fun fact. The Battle of Changping, which took place during the Zhao conquest, is infamous for one chilling reason. After Qin's victory, it's said they executed over 400,000 surrendered Zhao soldiers by burying them alive. Yes, alive. That's not a typo, that's ancient realpolitik. Scholars still debate the exact number. Some argue it's exaggerated. Others think it might actually be underreported. Either way, it's enough to make you pull your blanket tighter. Then comes Wei. Already weakened by past wars, Wei tries to resist. It tries diplomacy, flattery, even bribery. But Qin doesn't play those games. They prefer siege towers. Wei crumbles like a half-built sandcastle. With each conquest, Ying Zheng grows colder. Not crueler, just more detached. You see it in the way he speaks to his generals, no praise, no anger, just expectation. Failure is not an option. Not because he'll yell, but because you'll simply vanish from existence. Like that one general who lost a skirmish and was quietly reassigned to something vague called posthumous service. It's not just brute strength, though. Qin wins with strategy and infrastructure. You march along endless roads perfectly maintained, straight as arrows. The Qin built them years ago not for trade, but for troop movement. You pass messengers on horseback, galloping at terrifying speeds, delivering identical orders to 5 different fronts. No ambiguity, no confusion. Just conquest, copy-pasted across states. You also catch wind of a fringe legend whispered among villagers that Ying Zheng can see the future. That he dreamed the entire empire in his sleep, and now he's just acting it out. A prophecy on replay. Totally unprovable. Completely eerie. Now it's Chu's turn. Chu is massive, rich, strange, full of mysticism and ancient poetry. Their generals fight with passion, and their people cling to their traditions like sacred relics. But passion doesn't stop steel. And poetry doesn't block crossbows. Qin suffers losses here, real ones. At one point, even Ying Zheng's best general warns that the army needs to retreat and regroup. Zheng says no. Not loudly. Just firmly enough that no one suggests it again. Eventually, Chu falls too. As you wander through the conquered cities, you start to notice something curious. Qin doesn't just destroy, they absorb. They take the best from each state, the scholars, the engineers, the artisans, and pull them into the growing machine of empire. It's like watching a giant roll downhill picking up gold instead of dirt. Yan is next. A coastal state quieter than the others. They try something bold, an assassination. Yes, someone actually tries to kill Ying Zheng. You're there, sort of. Close enough to feel the tension, but far enough to avoid being skewered. The assassin Jing Ke almost succeeds. He gets close. Too close. But Zheng survives. Wounded, but enraged. Yan pays dearly for the attempt, which leaves one last state key. He sees the writing on the wall. They surrender before a single arrow is loosed. Honestly, it's the smartest move anyone's made in decades. So, in just over a decade, all 6 rival states fall to Qin. For the first time in history, what was once a chaotic landscape of bickering warlords is now a unified empire under one man. You stand on the ridge of a quiet hill watching Qin banners unfurl across the plains like a crimson tide. The drums have stopped. The map is complete. But here's the thing, conquest was the easy part. You return to the capital expecting relief, maybe celebration. What you find instead is something heavier. Qin is unified, but it's also tense. The people are unsure. The former nobles sulk in silence. The court holds its breath. Then comes the announcement. Ying Zheng isn't calling himself king anymore. He's invented a new title, Huangdi, emperor. But not just any emperor, the first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. No comparison to past rulers. No equal. He's not continuing a line. He's starting it. You feel the tremor ripple through the halls. This isn't a title. It's a declaration of divinity. Here's your mainstream historical fact to tuck under your pillow. The title Huangdi combines 2 ancient Chinese concepts, Huang meaning luminous or majestic, and Di meaning God or supreme being. Ying Zheng didn't just make himself the boss, he made himself a concept, an era, a cosmic inevitability. Historians still argue whether this moment marked the true beginning of Chinese imperialism, or just an extreme case of ego. Either way, you're witnessing the birth of an identity that would shape a civilization for millennia. You walk through the streets of Xianyang, the new capital, and feel the shift. Taxes are reorganized. Laws are standardized. Writing scripts are unified. Even axle widths of carts are regulated to match the new roads. It's obsessive. It's terrifying. It's oddly satisfying. Everything fits, except one thing. There's no room for dissent. You overhear a joke in a tea shop about the emperor's nose being too pointy. The next day, the shop is gone. Just gone. Swept off the map like a smudge. You learn to whisper more quietly. Qin Shi Huang doesn't govern. He rules. And the more power he consolidates, the more tightly the empire clenches its fists. The air gets thicker. The courtiers get quieter. And the emperor begins to worry about something new. Not enemies, not rivals, death. But that's a problem for another night. For now, let yourself drift in the strange stillness of a unified land. The flags are aligned. The armies are at rest. The people, though wary, sleep under one law. And you tucked behind history's curtain watch as the first emperor sits alone in his chamber, gazing out over a world he has bent to his will, silent, sleepless, and already thinking about what comes next. The nights are longer now, but not quieter. Somewhere in the darkness of the imperial palace, Qin Shi Huang paces. His footsteps echo through corridors built to outlast the weather, to outlast you, to outlast even time. But for all the might, he commands his sweeping armies, his tamed states, his standardized empire. There's one thing he still hasn't conquered: his own mortality. You follow him down a torchlit passage that smells of old incense and fresh ink. A servant trails behind him, trying not to breathe too loudly. The emperor doesn't speak much these days, but when he does, people tend to disappear afterward. Not necessarily because he's cruel, just because he's absolutely done with anything that wastes his time. He's barely in his 30s, but he walks like someone twice that. The weight of ruling has fused itself into his bones. His robes, once ornate, have become a kind of armor. The crown rests heavier on his head these days, and you notice he winces slightly when turning too quickly, perhaps from stress. Perhaps from the creeping, whispered truth. Emperors die too, and that's where your night stroll takes a turn toward the strange. See, Qin Shi Huang isn't just worrying about death, he's actively, obsessively planning how to avoid it. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The emperor becomes deeply fascinated with immortality. Not metaphorical immortality. Not legacy or living on in the hearts of the people fluff. No, he wants literal, physical, live, forever immortality. And he's ready to throw the full resources of his empire behind it. His court soon fills with mystics, herbalists, alchemists, and conmen. Some claim they can concoct elixirs of life from rare herbs and ground jade. Others whisper of faraway islands populated by immortals, places unreachable by normal boats cloaked in mist. One such rumored land is Penglai, a mythical isle, where the secret to eternal life supposedly drips from silver leaves into golden cups. Most historians believe Qin Shi Huang sent entire expeditions out in search of these phantom islands. Real ships, real men, real supplies. You imagine them setting sail into the unknown, chasing the soft perfume of legend, only to vanish beyond the horizon. Some never returned. Others did empty-handed, and shaking punished not for their failure, but for dashing his hope. Here's the quirky fringe tidbit of the night. One of these immortality seekers, a man named Shu Fu, allegedly sailed east and was never heard from again. But centuries later, Japanese folklore claims he arrived on their shores, bringing technology, culture, and medicine. Some say he became a god there. Others think he founded an entire civilization. Do you believe it? Who knows? But it's certainly one way to avoid getting executed for disappointing an emperor. You meanwhile trail behind as Qin Shi Huang tries more hands-on methods. The palace begins to stink of mercury, a shimmering silvery liquid used in many of the so-called immortality elixirs. The irony, of course, is that mercury is poisonous. And, while no one dares mention it out loud, you see the quiet panic in the palace physician's eyes every time the emperor gulps down another shimmering dose with a grimace and a prayer. Historians still argue whether Qin Shi Huang's eventual death was hastened by these elixirs or merely coincidental. But one thing's clear for a man obsessed with control. His own body becomes the final betrayal. You start noticing other symptoms too. Paranoia, sudden exiles, executions based on vague dreams and ambiguous omens. His belief in immortality doesn't make him peaceful. It makes him frantic, desperate to tie down every loose thread before the end arrives. Which brings us to a strange, candlelit moment. You're in his private chamber. Only a few trusted attendants remain. The emperor sits on a platform carved with dragons staring into a basin of water as if expecting it to speak. He's holding a turtle shell polished smooth. You realize he's returned to an ancient form of divination pyromancy, where cracks in burned bones or shells supposedly reveal fate. He's not experimenting, he's pleading, and that's when it hits you beneath the grandeur, beneath the title. He's still that boy from the palace, scared and suspicious, trying to outthink death, like it's just another rival kingdom. He begins reorganizing everything. He issues an order, build his tomb. Not a humble grave, not a marble shrine. No, he wants an underground city, a palace beneath the earth, a resting place so vast and elaborate that it would take decades to complete, one so secure it could protect him from even the afterlife. You sneak down to the construction site one moonless night. What you see leaves your mouth dry and your blanket slightly too thin. Tunnels stretch into darkness. Thousands of workers dig day and night. The air is thick with clay dust and candle smoke. And then you see them, statues, not just a few, thousands, lined in ranks, each one distinct, each one lifelike. Soldiers, archers, charioteers, terracotta warriors sculpted to guard the emperor in death. You stand among them surrounded by frozen faces. Some look tired, some fierce, some almost smug, and all of them silent. Here's your mainstream fact. The Terracotta Army is real. Discovered in 1974, it remains one of the most astonishing archaeological finds of all time. Historians estimate there are over 8,000 figures, and more may still be buried, and the fringe detail. Some believe the warriors were modeled on real people, not just generically, but precisely. That somewhere in those clay faces someone could identify an ancestor. The eerie part, you kind of believe it. You climb out of the tomb site, heart pounding with something between awe and dread. The emperor isn't just preparing for death, he's building a military campaign into the afterlife. He doesn't plan to rest. He plans to rule there too. And yet he still isn't satisfied. More elixirs, more rituals. He begins rotating his court constantly, never sleeping in the same place twice. Some say he fears assassination. Others believe he's trying to throw off the spirits of death who may be tracking him. Like trying to avoid a cosmic audit. You catch a glimpse of a scroll one night, fluttering from a servant's grip. It's a list of planetary alignments. The emperor, it seems, is timing his movements with the stars. Historians still debate how much astrology influenced his decisions. Some believe his every action in the later years was guided by celestial charts. Others think he was simply desperate for answers no general or advisor could give him. And still, he ages. The imperial artist paints portraits that get subtly less lifelike. The physicians start using more euphemisms. Unwell, tired, spirit drained. You know what they mean. Eventually, the emperor departs on an extended tour of the eastern provinces, supposedly to inspect his empire. But you suspect the real reason he's chasing another rumored elixir, one last hope hidden in some forgotten temple near the coast. He never returns. He dies in 210 BCE, somewhere along the journey, likely poisoned slowly by the very substances he hoped would save him. But here's the most Qin Dynasty move of all time. They don't announce his death immediately. They load his body into a carriage and continue the journey covering the stench with cartfuls of fish. The idea: maintain order, prevent unrest, control the narrative. That one final puppet show for a man who once was the puppet. You stand by the road as the silent caravan rolls past. No trumpets, no mourning, just the low creak of a cart carrying an emperor who spent his life fearing death and met it anyway. But even as you watch the carriage vanish into the horizon, you feel it. He's not really gone, not entirely. He's in the unified roads beneath your feet, in the legal code still quoted centuries later, in the whisper of terracotta feet shifting underground when no one is listening. He didn't live forever, but he came uncomfortably close. You don't leave the funeral procession even though there's no official funeral. You keep walking along the edge of the road as the wheels grind through mud, the stench of salted fish barely covering the scent of death. Qin Shi Huang is technically still alive, at least on paper. His ministers are scrambling for a plan. Because here's the uncomfortable truth no one wants to admit. When the most powerful man in the world dies, it's a problem, especially if he didn't leave clear instructions on what comes next. You settle near the tent of a certain eunuch official Zhao Gao. He's not famous yet. He's not in any statues. He doesn't look like someone who could steer the course of an empire. But he's about to. Zhao Gao is quiet, calculating, and very good at surviving. In other words, perfect for what's about to unfold. Here's your mainstream historical fact. When Qin Shi Huang dies, the announcement is delayed for 2 months. That's not normal. That's empire shaking weird. It gives Zhao Gao and a few others, including Prime Minister Li Si, plenty of time to forge the emperor's will. Yes, forge it. They rewrite the future in wet ink and nervous sweat, choosing to install the younger, more manipulable son, Hu Hai, instead of the original Crown Prince Fusu. You stretch out under a pine tree and stare up at the sky. Somewhere out there, Fusu is waiting for a letter from his father. He's stationed far from court, possibly too honest, too idealistic. So, of course, he has to go. You watch the messengers gallop off. And just like that, Fusu is ordered to commit suicide based on a completely fake command. Now that's a rough family group chat. Meanwhile, back in the capital, Zhao Gao is just getting started. The new emperor, Hu Hai, later known as Qin Shi, is young, nervous, and frankly not built for the job. He grew up in a palace where fear was currency and silence was survival. He spent his whole life in the shadow of a father who built an empire and wanted to conquer death. Now that father is gone, and the advisors around him are starting to circle like vultures in silk robes, here's your fringe tidbit. Zhao Gao doesn't just whisper in the emperor's ear, he eventually controls the very palace entrances. Like literally. He's in charge of who gets in and who gets out. It's said that at one point no one could speak to the emperor without going through Zhao first. Imagine running a kingdom from inside a velvet bottleneck. You think that sounds dramatic? Wait until the horse test. Zhao Ka Ever. The strategist begins to test the loyalty and gullibility of court officials. He brings a deer into the court and insists it's a horse. Yes, seriously. Most ministers, terrified of saying the wrong thing, agree with him. Oh yes, majestic steed. Fine animal, look at those hooves. But a few brave or foolish officials say the obvious, that's a deer. Zhao Gao nods quietly. And later, those ministers disappear. The message is clear. Don't argue with me even when I'm obviously lying. Especially then. Historians still argue whether the story of the deer horse test actually happened or whether it's just metaphorical for court insanity. Either way, the vibe is clear. Paranoia is now the dominant political strategy. You walk the halls of the once proud Qin court and feel the tension like smoke in your throat. There's no longer a unifying vision, no giant projects or sweeping reforms. just fear manipulation and whispered accusations. Ministers are executed for minor offenses. Others fake their deaths to escape. Some disappear so cleanly they might as well have melted into the floor tiles. You peek into the royal gardens one day and see the emperor sitting alone, tossing stones into a koi pond, muttering to himself. No advisors, no poets, just one very nervous monarch and the sound of fish nervously scattering. Here's a truth few like to admit: great empires can die of indigestion. Not famine, not invasion, just a bloated system unable to process its own power. Qin has grown too fast, consumed too many states, adopted too many contradictions. Now, without a strong leader to hold it together, the empire starts to buckle under its own weight. Riots start breaking out. Small at first, local, manageable, but they don't stay that way. One of the first sparks is a classic case of bad luck meeting bad policy. Two commanders, Chen Sheng and Wu Guang, are ordered to lead the troops to a garrison, but a storm delays them. And under Qin law, tardiness for military orders means death, even if it's weather-related. So what do? They rebel. Might as well go big, right? They start spreading the message. The Qin have lost the mandate of heaven. That phrase carries weight. It's not just poetic, it's a cosmic accusation. The heavens themselves supposedly grant legitimacy to emperors. Lose that favor, and anyone can rise up against you. And so they do, everywhere. You watch from a hilltop as fires blossom across the countryside. Local militias rise. Former nobles resurface. Entire regions try to secede. The Qin Dynasty is only 15 years old, and it's already coughing blood. Zhao Cao, in a final act of absolute villainy, grows so paranoid he accuses Qin Shi himself of disloyalty. The emperor, backed into a corner and crumbling under pressure, is forced to commit suicide. That's right. 2 emperors dead within 3 years. One poisoned by his own search for immortality, the other strangled by palace intrigue. You'd think it ends there, but no. Zhao Gao tries to install a puppet prince next. But even his grip slips. Eventually, he too is assassinated. A fitting end for a man who turned loyalty into performance art and lies into currency. Here's your mainstream fact by 206 BCE. The Qin Dynasty officially collapses. The capital burns. The once glorious laws and systems scatter like leaves in a river. And here's your quirky detail. The Terracotta Army. It wasn't discovered until 1974 by a group of farmers digging a well. For nearly 2 millennia, the greatest symbol of Qin's ambition sat quietly underground, undisturbed and nearly forgotten, until someone went looking for water and found an empire. So where does that leave you? Sitting by the road again, watching ash drift through the air like confetti from a party no one wanted to attend. You think of all the workers who died building the walls, the roads, the tombs. Of the artists who sculpted warriors they'd never meet. Of the soldiers who marched for unification, only to see it unravel before their sons were born. Historians still argue whether Qin was a necessary step in Chinese history or a tragic overreach. Some say it paved the way for the Han who would rule for centuries and stabilize what Qin couldn't. Others see it as a cautionary tale: move too fast, control too tightly, and even empires with perfect roads collapse into dust. But maybe Qin Shi Huang knew that. Maybe he wasn't trying to avoid death. Maybe he was just buying time. Time to build something big enough to be remembered. And here you are, remembering. The world is quieter now. The fires have burned down to embers, the swords are back in their sheaths, and the streets of the once great capital lie blanketed in ash and silence. You walk through them slowly, careful not to disturb the past more than it already has been. Cracked stone lions stare down from ruined gates, their once fierce jaws now chipped and moss-covered. Somewhere beneath your feet, the echo of an empire still murmurs, and yet no one really talks about the aftermath. What happens after a dynasty crashes into itself like a celestial-sized domino. Who picks up the pieces, who dares to rebuild? You squat in the shadow of a collapsed tower, and here's where things get interesting. Because even though the Qin Dynasty lasted barely 15 years shorter than most people's favorite TV shows, it left behind ideas that would shape centuries. Let's start with the roads. No, not just metaphorical roads, literal ones. Wide, flat, obsessively measured roads that stretched across the empire like tightly wound veins. Qin Shi Huang's obsession with standardization meant that carts across the country could suddenly roll using the same axle width. That may sound trivial at first glance, but it turned a chaotic patchwork of feudal trails into a proper network. Trade sped up. Troop movement became swift. Bureaucracy found wheels. Here's your mainstream historical fact: Qin standardized everything. Currency, weights, measures, writing systems, even the ruts in the road. That obsessive control, while suffocating politically, gave the next dynasty, whoever they would be, a very neat starter pack. You walk along one of these roads now, cracked with age, but still walkable. You imagine merchants hauling silk and salt scholars with scrolls under their arms, soldiers watching nervously from roadside towers. The infrastructure, unlike the emperor, had real staying power. And now, without an emperor, everyone's rushing to fill the vacuum. Meet Liu Bang, a former peasant and ex-policeman, and probably someone who would have been executed under Qin law if he hadn't been so slippery. You catch sight of him in a muddy camp, laughing too loudly, drinking too much, and somehow convincing everyone to follow him. He doesn't look like a hero. But then again, neither did Qin Shi Huang once upon a time. Here's your quirky tidbit. Liu Bang had a lucky streak so strong it practically deserves its own deity. There's a story, one that might be apocryphal, might be marketing, where he releases prisoners under his care, telling them they can run if they want. Most of them don't. They stay. They like him. Somehow, this slightly disheveled, charming mess of a man convinces people that he's different, that he's one of them. And weirdly, he kind of is. Liu Bang starts gobbling up territory, while another rebel leader, Xiang Yu, does the same from the opposite direction. You duck behind tents and scroll cases, watching the tension build like a summer storm. These two aren't allies. They're rivals. One aristocratic and brutal, the other peasant-born and persuasive. Xiang Yu has the better army. Liu Bang has the better narrative. And boy, do people love a narrative. Historians still argue whether Liu Bang's rise was more luck than strategy, whether he truly understood statecraft or just had the right face at the right time. But you sit on a riverbank, watching him talk to exhausted soldiers like they're old friends, and you see it, the rare ability to connect. Not dominate, not manipulate, just lead. Meanwhile, the Qin remnants try to stitch themselves back together. A few generals hole up in old fortresses, shouting slogans about loyalty and tradition. But their cause is fading like ink in the rain. You walk past their banners one night and see a teenage soldier burning official documents to keep warm. No orders, no honor, just survival. the wars rage for years. Too long, really. Xiang Yu wins more battles, but Liu Bang wins more hearts. And when the two finally clash for real at the Battle of Gaixia, it's not just military strategy that wins the day. It's poetry. No, really. Liu Bang's army surrounds Xiang Yu's and begins singing the folk songs of Xiang Yu's homeland, making his soldiers homesick and demoralized. Imagine being in a trench and the other side starts singing your grandma's lullabies. It's psychological warfare wrapped in nostalgia. Xiang Yu loses. He kills himself on the banks of the Wu River, declaring, "Heaven has forsaken me." You don't know whether to feel pity or poetic satisfaction. Probably both. Liu Bang, the ex-policeman, becomes Emperor Gaozu of Han. And with that, the Han Dynasty begins. But you haven't left the Qin yet. Not really. Because here's the weird part. The Han keep a lot of what Qin built. The roads still in use. The standardized writing embraced. The legal codes tweaked but foundational. It's like Qin set the stage, ran the rehearsal, and then got booted off before opening night. You walk through the first Han court and notice something strange. There's a plaque on the wall, small discreet. It's an imperial edict banning certain cruel Qin punishments, like cutting people in half. Yeah, that was a thing. Qin justice wasn't known for subtlety. Here's your mainstream fact: the Han Dynasty did tone things down a bit. They mixed legalism with Confucianism, which is kind of like softening a metal with silk. The result, a more sustainable governance model. The empire lasts over 400 years, and the fringe tidbit, Qin Shi Huang's tomb, is still sealed. Yes. To this day, archaeologists haven't fully excavated the emperor's burial mound. Ancient texts say it contains rivers of mercury and a ceiling mimicking the constellations. But so far, scientists haven't cracked it open, partly out of respect, partly because of concerns about preservation, and maybe, just maybe, because they're worried about, ancient curses. You pause at the base of the burial mound. The air is still. The earth doesn't tremble. But there's a hum beneath your feet. A kind of hush that doesn't come from silence, but from something waiting. You sit on a stone and watch the horizon fade to orange. Villagers walk by, unaware that beneath this hill lies a king who tried to rewrite death, a court of terracotta soldiers, frozen mid-March, and maybe, just maybe, rivers of poison running still. The story isn't over. You walk the roads again, these old Qin roads now dressed in Han silk, and you wonder what traces of you might last 15 years after you're gone. Let alone 2,000. A rickety cart rolls by. The driver hums a tune passed down since Qin times. His coins bear a Han emperor's face, but the size standardized by Qin. The language he mutters under his breath, written in characters shaped by the first unifier. Even the route he's taking still follows the ancient blueprint. You smile. The empire died, but the idea, it's still walking. Dust swirls in the morning breeze as you walk along a quiet path that used to be a military road. It cuts straight through the countryside like someone dragged a ruler across the landscape. Farmers are back in their fields planting rice, threading dreams into rows. Children splash in irrigation ditches that were once royal construction zones. And behind it all, like a stubborn ghost, the Qin still lingers. You pause beside a small shrine barely more than a pile of stones and incense stubs. It's dedicated not to a god, but to a general. You lean in and read the carving Meng Tian. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Meng Tian was one of Qin's greatest military minds. Under Qin Shi Huang's rule, he led massive campaigns to secure the empire's northern borders against the Xiongnu, a confederation of nomadic tribes. He also played a major role in the early construction of the Great Wall. Yes, that wall. The one people still debate about whether you can see it from space. But Meng Tian's story doesn't end with victory. It ends with a letter. After the emperor died, Meng Tian found himself caught in the net of palace politics. Remember Zhao Gao, the power-hungry puppet master who made ministers call deer horses? Well, he saw Meng Tian's loyalty to the original Crown Prince Fusu as a threat. So Zhao Gao did what manipulators do best. He forged a decree and sent orders for Meng Tian to kill himself. And Meng Tian, like so many before him, obeyed. You sit beside his shrine and wonder how it feels to die, knowing the letter that sentenced you was a lie. Probably like being mugged by history. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some legends claim Meng Tian didn't just build the wall. He invented the brush pen. That's right. The thing school kids would use for the next 1,000 years to write poetry love letters and really annoying exam answers that might trace back to a military general who liked clean lines. Historians still argue whether the invention was truly his, or if it's just one of those stories people tell to connect genius with tragedy. Either way, it's a lovely image, this fearsome general finishing battle plans and then doodling characters on bamboo strips with a prototype calligraphy pen. And oh, bamboo strips. You're going to see a lot of those. Before paper became common, people wrote on bamboo or wooden slips, stringing them together like sentence kebabs. You picture a clerk hunched over in a dusty hall scribbling laws onto hundreds of slats. Lose one, and boom, you've just deleted a paragraph. You wander into an abandoned administrative office, long since emptied by war. Scrolls, or what's left of them, litter the floor. One of them talks about standardizing the length of axles. Another discusses the number of steps that should lead up to a government building. Qin didn't just micromanage, it macro-managed your micro-decisions. You sit in the ruins and realize something. For all its cold efficiency, Qin was obsessed with order. Every law, every measurement, every stroke of a character was designed to make chaos behave. But human beings, we don't behave. We rebel. We interpret. We sigh deeply and roll our eyes when someone tells us the spacing between bricks must be precisely 2 fingers wide. Still, there's something soothing about rules, isn't there? You can see why some people loved the Qin system, especially those who never had a system before. For example, imagine you're a merchant in a rural area before Qin's unification. You walk into a new region, and suddenly no one takes your money. No one understands your writing, and the weights used to measure your grain are completely different. That's not exotic, that's terrifying. Qin came in and said, "Relax. Everything is going to match now. Comfort through control. You follow a river bend into a village where people still use some of those old measurements. The currency has changed faces many times, but the round coin with the square hole, still here. The shape wasn't just symbolic, it was functional. Easy to string on a belt, carry in batches, pass from hand to hand like a metallic lifeline. And just when you think you've wandered into nostalgia, something more modern pricks your ears. Someone is arguing about Qin again. 2 elderly scholars beneath a plum tree sipping tea and throwing verbal punches with the gentlest of tones. Qin was a necessary evil, one says. It created the spine of China, the other waves his cup. Spines can snap. They ruled through fear. No love, no loyalty, just punishment. And there it is, that eternal tug-of-war. Historians still argue whether Qin was the dark foundation for China's later glory, or just a cautionary tale of what happens when you rule with a hammer and forget the heart. You nod politely to the old men and keep walking. The path narrows, curling uphill toward what used to be a signal tower. Qin built thousands of them. Simple structures where soldiers could light fires and send messages across vast distances using smoke and flame. Early imperial Wi-Fi. Climb the stairs slowly now, it's been centuries, and look out over the land. Hills roll like ocean waves. Villages blink sleepily in the valley. Somewhere far to the west beyond sight, beyond knowing, is the tomb of Qin Shi Huang. Still sealed, still untouched. They say the rivers inside flow with mercury, and weirdly, there might be truth to that. Here's your fringe fact. Scientists have detected elevated mercury levels in the soil near the tomb mound. It might be from natural deposits, or it might mean the ancient texts were right. Qin tried to replicate the world underground, complete with artificial geography, flowing mercury rivers, and a celestial ceiling. All to give the emperor eternal rule even in death. You lean on the crumbling edge of the tower and think about that. A man who unified millions, who built walls and burned books, who hunted immortality and was devoured by silence, still rules a kingdom no one has ever seen. Sometimes power doesn't die, it just sleeps. Down below, a group of children runs past, laughing, chasing a wheel with sticks. Their parents harvest rice. Life continues. And yet, around the edges of everything, through the ink of their characters, the width of their roads, the songs in their dialects, Qin is still here. Not as tyrants, not as statues, as shadows in the foundation. You walk back down the tower steps, everyone worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Then at the bottom, someone calls your name. Or, no, not your name. The name you would have had if you lived then. A laborer, a scribe, a soldier, a ghost. It doesn't matter. You turn toward the sound anyway, because in this place, in this story, you belong. It's just past dusk when you drift into the old capital Xianyang, or what's left of it. Once the shining nerve center of Qin, it now crumbles quietly under ivy and mud, hiding its secrets like a tired librarian, tucking away forbidden scrolls. You trail your fingers along sun-warmed stones, each one bearing the weight of forgotten ceremony, fierce proclamations, and boots, so many boots. You imagine the place at its height. Stone archways gleaming under banners of black and gold. Eunuchs scurrying across courtyards. Officials in stiff robes dictating laws faster than scribes can scratch them down. Prisoners carted away. And above it all, Qin Shi Huang, looking out over his city with those famously narrowed eyes. Now, just frogs and the occasional owl, but something tugs at your memory. A rumor, a story. Something the official histories barely whisper about, but that crops up like a weed in old village tales. Whispers of untouched secrets buried beneath the city. No, not the tomb that once buried outside the capital. This is something else. A chamber beneath the palace sealed hastily when the dynasty fell, filled with items too dangerous, too strange, or too embarrassing to survive a change in regime. You pause outside the overgrown remains of what used to be the imperial archives. a place that once held every law decree and censored poem the first emperor's court could get its hands on. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Qin employed one of the largest bureaucracies in the ancient world. Thousands of scribes, archivists, and court historians were tasked with copying, organizing, and storing endless documents. But when the dynasty fell, many of these were burned, especially those considered politically dangerous. Still, not everything made it to the flames. Some things were simply hidden. You slip through the remnants of a broken doorway and step into shadow. The air smells of damp earth and dust. Beneath your sandals, ceramic shards crunch softly fragments of old record jars. You kneel to examine one and notice a strange script, not quite the standardized small seal script of Qin. Older, possibly ceremonial, possibly something not meant to be read anymore. A gust of wind makes the rafters creak above you, and for a moment the past leans in just a little closer. You shuffle deeper inside and come across what looks like a half-collapsed stairwell. The steps descend into murk, but your fingers find grooves along the walls carved, not chiseled, as though someone made them in a hurry. At the bottom, the air feels denser, cooler, almost metallic. And then there it is, a room. Small, sealed behind a rotten wooden screen that gives way with the lightest touch. Inside, it's barely more than a cave. But your eyes adjust and you see strange items piled in ritual disarray. An obsidian mirror cracked straight down the middle. An unmarked scroll case wrapped in silk and tied with golden thread. A terracotta dog, its face oddly expressive, almost smug. And a bronze vessel unlike any you've seen before, shaped like a mountain with tiny canals etched across its surface like veins or tributaries. Was it a Model A puzzle? A symbol, or something else entirely? Here's your quirky tidbit. Ancient Chinese engineers sometimes created topographic wine vessels, literal bronze maps that held alcohol. You'd pour wine down a mountain, and it would trickle through tiny rivers into cups waiting below. Half party trick, half political statement. This is our land, and we drink from its lifeblood. But this one doesn't look festive. This one looks sacred, or cursed, or both. Historians still argue whether Qin kept ceremonial relics from earlier dynasties as trophies, or whether these were tools used in long-forgotten rituals meant to legitimize their rule. Either way, some things never made it into the official records. Like the scroll case, you lift it carefully. The silk is stiff with age. Inside, the bamboo slips are fragile but still legible in the flickering light. The script isn't legalist. It's something older, cryptic, poetic, and unsettling. You read aloud, "He who commands heaven must first silence the earth." What does that mean? Is it a curse? A law? A warning. You feel suddenly exposed, as if some ancient gaze has turned its eye your way. You wrap the scroll again and tuck it back into its hiding place. You're not here to awaken curses. You're here to listen. As you leave the chamber, your foot kicks something in the dust. It's a jade pendant, carved into the shape of a dragon devouring its own tail. A loop, a cycle. You pocket it. Outside, the stars have blinked awake. You walk back through the sleeping ruins, and the silence feels full like a pause before something resumes. A secret that's decided to let you keep it for now. You spend the night in an old watchtower, curled beneath broken beams, the jade dragon warm against your chest. And as dreams fold around you, they bring with them snatches of voices not your own. The order of the state is the order of the cosmos. Measure twice, punish once. Even heaven fears one who controls time. Morning comes too early, but you rise with it, stretch your limbs, and start walking again. Out of the capital, away from the relics, toward something even stranger, because now you've heard of a name that barely survives in the records. A figure so obscure most scholars skip over them entirely. A girl, a servant, possibly a magician, possibly more. And if the rumors are true, she may have known Qin Shi Huang more intimately than any advisor general or concubine. She may have been the one to plant the seed, the idea of becoming immortal. You follow that trail now. Through towns that no longer exist, over bridges rebuilt a dozen times, into the folds of mountains that don't remember their own names. All to find a story no dynasty wanted written down, but someone did, and they etched it into stone hidden behind a waterfall protected by moss and time. You won't find her in your textbooks. You won't see her in statues, but she may be the only one who ever told the first emperor no and lived. The mountains close around you like a deep breath slowly held. Mist fingers through the valleys as you ascend, following a trail worn smooth by time, and goats the only creatures still confident in this terrain. You're chasing a rumor now, a name half lost in translation, whispered like gossip across villages, where cell service dies and stories live forever. They call her Mei Lian in one version. In another, Leon of the Smoke. Always a servant, always forgotten. Except, of course, by the emperor. You press on sandals damp from dew robes, fluttering in the cold updrafts that curl around pine branches like old hands. The trail takes you through a narrow pass where sound echoes strangely. You test your voice and it returns to you. Softer, almost uncertain. The cliffs here carry memories. Some say this was where Qin Shi Huang met her on a detour during one of his sacred journeys away from the court, seeking signs from heaven or immortality or both. And she appeared, not in silk, not in chains, just there. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Qin Shi Huang made 5 legendary tours across his empire, inspecting roads, temples, and omens. He believed himself chosen by heaven, but was also deeply superstitious. He sought signs in star stones and stomach aches. If thunder clapped mid-sentence, he would change decisions. If a deer stumbled near his chariot, he'd halt the caravan. Superstition and policy were deeply tangled. But then there's Mei Lian. No records, just whispers. One account found scratched on the inside of a ceramic water jug dug up in a cave, and another etched behind a waterfall. Yes, this waterfall. You hear it before you see it. The sound, constant, soothing absolute, like the world is whispering a lullaby with its mouth full. You step behind the sheet of falling water and find it. Not a chamber, not a shrine. Just a wall of stone, polished smooth by centuries of wind, hand chiseled into language. The carving reads like a spell, or maybe a diary. He asked me what death was. I said it's a closed eye that opens elsewhere. Quirky tidbit. Some fringe scholars claim that women in early Chinese courts, especially servants trained in the yin arts, practiced a kind of proto-medicine that mixed herbology, dream work, and meditation. Not magic, but adjacent. They weren't advisors. They were guides. Softly powerful. Quietly dangerous. Historians still argue whether such women ever had true influence, or if stories like Mei Lian's are just narrative comfort food made to humanize tyrants. But isn't that what we do? We write stories to make monsters understandable. To imagine that someone somewhere reached the unreachable part of them, you lean in and trace another line. He said he wanted to rule forever. I asked him why ruling once wasn't enough. You smirk. That's the kind of question that gets you executed in Qin. But according to the rest of the inscription, broken and overgrown in places, Mei Lian wasn't punished. She was kept close. Not as a concubine, not as a servant, as something else. A mirror, maybe. One he could speak to when the armor of being the first emperor grew too heavy, and it did grow heavy. In his final years, Qin Shi Huang became obsessed with death, not just avoiding it, but understanding it, conquering it, disproving it. He sent expeditions across the sea to find the legendary Isles of the Immortals. He drank mercury elixirs. He consulted hermits with suspiciously good skin. And every night, they say, he asked the stars the same question. What comes next? You sit on a mossy rock near the waterfall and try to imagine being him, not the emperor, but the man behind the title. The one who unites the world, then can't bear to leave it, who stands on top of everything and feels nothing but dread. And beside him perhaps stood Mei Lian. Here's the thing, when he died, he was not in the capital. He was on tour, on the road again. Some say he was searching for the final formula. Others say he was simply running from whispers of rebellion, from old prophecies from himself. When he died, it was kept secret. For weeks. His corpse hidden in a chariot surrounded by rotting fish to mask the smell. Court officials pretended he was alive, issuing fake decrees, signing in his name. And what happened to Mei Lian? No record, no rumor, nothing. But you stare at the carving again and catch a final line barely visible, covered in lichen. I walked away when his breath stopped. I took nothing. He kept everything. And then a symbol, a swirl inside a square. Not a signature. More like a seal or a curse. You lean back, the roar of the waterfall replacing your thoughts. Whatever Mei Lian was, sage, trickster, confidant, ghost, she's gone now. But her words remain. And they feel dangerously true. You return to the trail, and for hours the mountains say nothing. Just wind. Just the crunch of gravel. Just your own heartbeat bouncing off granite. Then, as the sun begins to sink, you reach the outskirts of a village so old it refuses to appear on maps. The people here speak in clipped dialects and glance at you like they've seen your kind before in stories. A child tugs your sleeve and points to the edge of the village. "You want the old tombs," he says, voice full of certainty. You nod and follow, past rice paddies, past sleeping oxen, to a stone ring barely a rise in the earth now. But once it must have been grand. You can feel it. Buried beneath layers of forgetting is a network of minor tombs, officials, artisans, maybe even forgotten wives. The imperial court's satellite dead orbiting the first emperor's sealed darkness. You step carefully, watching your footing when your eye catches a broken sculpture. Not a soldier. Not a scholar. A woman, one hand on her heart. One hand extended palm up, waiting or offering. You kneel before her and wonder if the artisans who carved her ever dared say her name. If Qin Shi Huang ever told anyone what she meant to him. If someone tried to erase her from history, but stone resisted, because stone remembers. The jade dragon around your neck hums slightly in the growing cold. You touch it, and for a moment the sculpture's eyes seem to follow yours. And in that quiet, you finally understand what Mei Lian might have taught him. Not how to live forever, but how to let go. You sleep that night under stars that feel heavier than usual, as if they're watching you rather than the other way around. The sculpture of the woman lingers in your thoughts, her eyes, her outstretched hand, her silence. You imagine her standing just behind your dreams, not haunting, not angry, just observing. When morning comes, the mist has retreated, and the villagers go about their chores like actors in an old play. You nod at the child who showed you the tombs, and he nods back like you've passed some kind of test. You gather your things, adjust your robes, and begin walking east toward a place the Qin Dynasty once considered the edge of the world, where the mountains taper off and the sea whispers like an ancient secret. You're tracing the route of the most ambitious and perhaps most ridiculous project Qin Shi Huang ever pursued, the search for immortality. Mainstream historical fact, coming in hot. The first emperor dispatched alchemists, magicians, and explorers across the empire and far beyond it, in search of the legendary Isles of the Immortals. One such expedition, led by the mystic Xu Fu, reportedly took hundreds of young men and women across the sea, never to return. Some believe they reached Japan. Others say they drowned. And a few fringe theories, brace yourself, claim they found something and chose not to come back. You walk now along what's left of those coastal paths, your toes brushing reeds and shells, salt clinging to your skin. The wind here smells different, lighter, mischievous almost, like it's in on a joke it refuses to share. In ancient times, they believed the sea was a kind of living scroll, ever shifting, ever writing. Messages from the heavens appeared in waves, omens in foam patterns, curses in shipwrecks. You pass fishermen mending nets with fingers that move like whispers. One of them, an old woman with a grin full of missing teeth, leans over and mutters, "Looking for ghosts or gold." You answer, "Maybe both." She laughs and points inland. Then talk to the one who talks to stones. You're not sure what that means, but directions are directions. Quirky tidbit. In coastal folklore, there's a figure known as the Stone Listener. Usually a woman, sometimes a hermit, occasionally a child. She listens to rocks, yes, literally. Presses her ear to the earth to hear voices no one else can. Depending on the tale, she's a prophet, a scam artist, or just lonely. But she always knows things. You find her eventually, a hillside shack hidden in bamboo. Smoke curls lazily from a crooked chimney. The door's open, but there's no sound. You step inside and the smell of sandalwood and dried ginger tickles your nose. She's there, kneeling, palms pressed to a large flat stone. She doesn't look up when she speaks. You've come from the capital and the tombs. You're not finished yet. You blink. Are you the Stone Listener? She snorts. What else would I be dressed like this? Fair point. She gestures to the stone. It doesn't speak to everyone. You have to know how to sit, how to wait. Most people just want to hear themselves echoed back. You sit beside her. Slowly, respectfully. The stone is cool and smooth beneath your fingers. You lean in, and nothing. At first, then a hum. Or maybe it's just your heartbeat. Then images, flashing, not clear, like shadows in deep water, a massive ship. Lanterns swaying in stormlight. A man in white robes shouting orders. Children crying. A scroll dropped into the waves, its ink dissolving. You pull back breath caught in your throat. She nods. Xu Fu's voyage. They say he found something. Not immortality. Something worse. Historians still argue whether Xu Fu really existed or if he was an invention to justify massive resource spending. Some records say he simply vanished. Others claim he became a god. A few fringe scholars have tried connecting him to local myths in Japan and Korea, heroic founders, sky-bearded sages, even sea dragons. The truth is, we just don't know. But the stone listener believes he survived and stayed away on purpose. Immortality, she says, isn't about living forever. It's about refusing to die, even when you should. You chew on that for a moment. It doesn't taste pleasant. Then she hands you a map. No words, just lines. And an island drawn in red ink. It sits far off the coast past where modern ships tend to go. Not on any GPS. But the path is marked clearly and the ink is fresh. You'll need a boat, she says. You raise an eyebrow. You have one. She grins. No. But I know someone who owes me. And that's how you find yourself hours later on a creaky wooden vessel, captained by a man who introduces himself only as Crab. Why Crab, you ask? He shrugs. I walk sideways through life. Fair enough. As the coast shrinks behind you, the sea turns strange. Not rough, not calm, just aware. The air thickens. Time loses its grip. Your thoughts drift like kelp. You dream with your eyes open. Then, through the mist, it appears. The island. It isn't large or lush or gleaming. It's gray, silent, and scattered with broken pillars. Not natural stone. Carved, worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. You step onto the shore, the crunch of gravel loud in the stillness. And there, half buried in sand, is the statue of a man holding a scroll. Not Qin Shi Huang, not Xu Fu, someone else, unsmiling, waiting. You walk inland, guided by instinct more than trail. At the center of the island is a structure, not a building. More like a dome made of interlocking stones. No door, no windows. Just one narrow slit where wind whistles like a flute. You press your hand to the surface, warm, and then, without warning, a voice, not yours, says, "He came here, and he left nothing behind." The island breathes. You sit, because what else can you do? And the stone beneath you begins to hum. The humming deepens not louder, but fuller like a bass note from an instrument made of mountains. You sit still, your body cradled by the stone dome, as if it's been waiting just for you. The air is heavy with salt and meaning. You exhale slow and long, and the sound seems to echo not outside, but inside your chest. The voice comes again, soft as waves on a distant shore. He thought he could outrun endings, but every path leads home. You don't know if it's the stone, the island, or your own unraveling thoughts, but something is speaking to you. And it doesn't feel like a hallucination. It feels like a warning. You stand and walk slowly around the dome, your fingers brushing weather-worn carvings barely visible to the eye. Swirls, dragons, clouds, boats, flames. Each one tells a piece of something too big to grasp all at once. Like a puzzle that's only complete when you stop trying to solve it. Mainstream historical fact here, the Qin Empire's obsession with death wasn't just personal, it was systemic. Massive funds went into mausoleums, spirit roads, rituals, and the bureaucracy of the afterlife. Official ranks extended into eternity, dead nobles expected to maintain their positions with ghosts of servants attending them. It was believed the afterlife mirrored the empire, and so the empire had to be eternal. But this island is not eternal. It's decaying, fading. You can feel it in the way the sand shifts under your feet, in the way the birds refuse to land. You find another statue, smaller, simpler, a child eyes closed holding a lotus. At its base is another inscription half buried in moss. He tried to chain time. It drowned him instead. Quirky fringe tidbit time. A few rare scrolls recovered from burned libraries speak of a forbidden Qin ritual, the binding of the soul. It involved jade seals, salted ink, and the burial of a personal name in a sealed box. The idea was to remove your true self from the world so it could not be summoned by death. The ritual was outlawed not long after the first emperor died, probably because, well, it didn't work. Or maybe it worked too well. You wander toward the northern edge of the island, where the stones grow denser, almost as if they're growing out of the land rather than resting on it. The air shifts, here grows cooler. You hear the faint clang of metal, not rhythmic like tools, but random, like echoes from another time. Then you see it, a pit, circular, 10 paces across, lined with rusted gears and collapsed scaffolding. This isn't Qin work. It's later, possibly Han. Someone came back. You kneel and look closer. At the center of the pit lies a jade tablet, cracked in half, the characters only partially legible. He sleeps beneath the cloudless sky. You look up, no clouds, not a single one. You squint and realize the sky here isn't just empty, it's motionless. No wind, no birds, not even the sun seems to move. The whole place feels like it's paused, like someone hit mute on the universe. You whisper aloud, "Is this it? Is this where he went?" And the ground beneath you thrums, answering not in words, but in memories. You see flashes again, Qin Shi Huang, older, thinner, clutching a bottle of dark liquid. His skin is sallow, his eyes sunken. He drinks, staggers, and falls, but doesn't die. Not right away. Then, Shu Fu, younger than you imagined, steering a boat through fog teeth, chattering as he clutches scrolls too sacred to open. And a third figure, always at the edge of sight, a woman in gray. Her face veiled, never speaking, always watching. The voice inside you murmurs, "He was never meant to last." But he insisted. Historians still argue whether the emperor's final expedition was truly about immortality, or if it masked something else, fear of rebellion, a secret illness, or even paranoia stoked by advisors who saw an opportunity. What is known is this: by the time he died, the court was fractured. His sons were plotting, and the foundations of his eternal empire were already crumbling. You walk back toward the center of the island, heart beating slow and deep. The dome stands unmoved, timeless. You press both hands against the entrance slit. Nothing, and then warmth. A slow pulse, like a heartbeat answering yours. The stone shifts slightly, just enough to let you squeeze through. Inside is not a tomb, not a chamber, just space. Quiet, still. A room made of smooth jade walls that reflect no light but glow softly. And in the center, a chair, carved from a single piece of obsidian. Empty. You approach it cautiously, expecting bones or ashes or relics, but there's only a small palm-sized mirror placed on the seat. You pick it up. Your reflection stares back older than it should be. Eyes tired, mouth unreadable. And behind you in the mirror, someone stands. You whirl around. No one, just the chair. The voice again, closer now. The secret was never about living forever. It was about what you leave behind when you don't. You sit in the chair without thinking. The mirror warms in your hand. Images flow again. Armies marching bridges, built scrolls, burned statues rising. And then the emperor alone in his chamber pacing, muttering, writing. Not decrees, not laws, letters. To whom? To himself. Tome Lien, you'll never know. But one thing becomes clear: he wasn't afraid of death. Not really. He was afraid of erasure, of disappearing so completely that even the myths wouldn't bother mentioning him. He wanted to burn so bright that no one could forget. And in doing so, he scorched everything else. You leave the chair, leave the dome. The sun at last seems to have moved. Just a little. A blink. A nod. The tide is higher now. The boat won't wait. As you board, Crab raises an eyebrow. Find what you were looking for. You answer, I think I found what he was afraid I would. He grins. That's worse. The boat turns the island, shrinking behind you like a dream you can't quite recall. The wind picks up. The real world returns. Cell towers flicker into signal. The sea smells normal again, but something inside you has shifted. And though you left the mirror behind, the reflection still lingers. You're no emperor, but you're not a tourist anymore either. And somewhere far beneath stone and sea and story, he still waits. For what? Maybe for someone to finally say, it's okay. You can rest now. You dock in silence. The mainland smells louder somehow. Fried dumplings, motor oil, and the metallic scent of city rain soaking through old concrete. You step off the boat, feeling older, heavier, like the air is dragging at your ankles. Crab offers a lazy salute and sails off again as if he's part of a different story entirely. You're back in the modern world, but a layer has peeled away. The Qin Dynasty isn't just history now, it's presence. Still there, hiding under highways masquerading as hills, whispering from beneath ceramic tiles and vending machines. You head inland again, this time toward a small museum off the tourist trail. It's built on the ruins of a Qin administrative office, and the guidebooks say there's nothing much to see. But you're not looking for sights. You're listening for echoes. Inside, the air is dry and brittle. Fluorescent lights buzz like bored insects. A school group clusters by the entrance, their teacher explaining tax records in monotone. You move past them toward the back exhibit, where a small placard reads, Recovered Documents. Late Qin Bureau Archives. Untranslated. Mainstream historical fact toward the end of the dynasty. Qin administrators kept meticulous ledgers. They recorded population shifts, harvest quotas, and even toilet paper rations made from bamboo slips, splinters not included. These records reveal how centralized the Qin system had become, life scheduled down to the grain count. One slip here catches your eye. Unlike the others, it's stained not with water, but what looks like oil or perhaps ink from a seal. And its symbols, they twist slightly. Just enough to suggest they weren't written by someone calm or sober. One character appears repeatedly, Kong emptiness. You step closer, nose nearly brushing the glass. A tiny crack in the case, just big enough. You lean in and you swear you hear something. Breathing, soft, rhythmic, like someone sleeping under floorboards. You back away. Blink. The glass is fine now. No crack, just reflection. Quirky fringe theory alert. Some fringe scholars suggest the Qin script carried encoded intent, a kind of spell baked into handwriting. They believe calligraphy wasn't just art, but technology. According to one particularly stubborn researcher, if you replicate certain brush strokes in the correct sequence, you wake something. Yeah, sleep tight. You don't copy the characters. You're curious, not cursed. Instead, you move on to the next exhibit, a clay jar, average, looking chipped at the rim. The description reads, presumed funerary vessel, contents unknown, believed to contain dream fragments. Dream fragments. You lean closer. Inside the jar is empty, or rather it looks empty, but the moment your shadow crosses its mouth you see motion. Just a flicker. Like a fish slipping through oil. Gone. You don't stick around for the gift shop. Outside, the rain has started again. Thin needles that prick your scalp and soak through your collar. The sky hangs low and bruised. You walk along the old wall, what remains of the inner fortress from the Qin capital. Once, this would have been painted red and gold, soldiers lined in perfect rows, banners snapping in imperial wind. Now, tourists pose with selfie sticks and argue about where to get noodles. It's here beside a cracked stone stele that an old man waves you over. He's selling postcards but doesn't seem interested in pushing them, just watching. His eyes are too sharp for someone that still. You've been to the island, he says. You freeze. Crab said you might stop here. Of course he did. The man gestures for you to sit. Offers tea so bitter it feels like a dare. He says nothing for a long time, just sips, watches the wall. Finally, do you know why the dynasty collapsed so quickly? You nod. After Qin Shi Huang died, his son took over. Bad leadership, corruption, revolts. He shakes his head. No, it fell because it was too afraid to bend. Historians still debate whether the Qin collapse was due to structural overreach or moral rigidity. Some argue the emperor's ruthless efficiency planted the seeds of rebellion. Too many farmers conscripted. Too many scholars silenced too much order at the expense of resilience. Like a glass sword, sharp, impressive, and destined to shatter. The emperor wanted to live forever, the man says. But he forgot how to let things live. You sit with that. Let it thud around your skull like a loose marble. And then he stands suddenly finished with you. You should go to the tunnels, he says. They'll find you if you're meant to. Cryptic old men and spontaneous destiny. Great. You start walking again, this time, toward a hill, known only by its nickname, the Hollow Step. Locals say it's haunted, not by ghosts, but by memories. The stone steps sound solid until you reach one near the top, and then it echoes like you're stepping into a cavern. No one's ever found a cave beneath it. But the sound remains. Constant, unexplained. You climb slowly. The rain eases. Fog curls at your feet. At the top, you hear it. Hollow. A single step with no weight. And then the ground opens. No dramatic collapse, no heroic plunge. Just a quiet shift and suddenly you're sliding. Down a slope slick with moss and thyme. When you stop, it's utterly dark. You listen. You're breathing. Drips. Maybe rats. Maybe something older. A light flickers to life. It's a lantern. Metal, ancient. But it ignites in your hand like it recognizes you. The walls around you glisten, not rock. Clay bricks, stamped with the Qin seal. You're in a tunnel, one of many. A whisper curls around the corridor. They built down, not just up. You walk. The tunnel bends gently like it was designed for someone who didn't want to be startled. Along the way, niches appear in the wall, tiny alcoves filled with carvings. Faces, dozens, all different, all watching. Some smiling, some crying, one winking. You don't stop. You pass a mural half faded, half vivid, showing a man pressing a seal into a dragon's skull. The dragon is alive, screaming, but the seal glows. The caption beneath reads, "Power is borrowed, and the debt is eternal." You touch the wall. It's warm, and then you hear it again, breathing. But this time it isn't soft. It's labored, right ahead. You raise the lantern and see the door. The door isn't grand. No gleaming gold, no intimidating archway carved with divine beasts. Just thick wood, bound in iron warped with age and humidity, wedged into the tunnel wall like it was never meant to be found. Yet, here it is. And here you are. You stare at it, hand trembling slightly on the lantern. There's no handle, no lock, just a single mark at its center, burned in, not carved. The character Feng sealed, mainstream historical fact. The Qin Dynasty sealed more than just tombs. Whole libraries, temples, even roads shut tight by imperial decree. If something didn't align with the emperor's view of control and order, it didn't just disappear, it was buried. Literally. A form of historical erasure by architectural decree. You reach out. Not because it's smart, but because this is where the story has pulled you. The moment your fingers touch the wood, it shudders just once. A low creak follows soft as someone stretching after centuries of sleep. Then the door swings inward. Behind it, pitch black. You step through. The lantern flickers, and the space ahead of you blooms with color. Not painted murals, no, something weirder. The walls are covered in layers of silk. Torn scrolls, shredded robes, woven strips dyed in imperial red, jade, green, burial white. They wave slightly in some unseen current of air. You brush your fingers along them. They're dry but alive somehow, as if they remember what they once were. At your feet, the stone path turns into packed earth, and your boots sink slightly with each step. A soft squelch like walking on wet parchment. This chamber isn't a room, it's a cocoon, and in the center of it, half sunken in the earth, is a low platform. On it, a lacquered box no larger than a pillow. You approach, heart thudding now with each footfall. The box is bound with red string in a pattern so complex it makes your eyes water. You recognize the knot from that dome on the island, from the base of the jade statue, from that cracked pit by the rusted gears. The binding of the soul, fringe tidbit time. Some claim a surviving manual of the binding was discovered in a farmer's attic during the early 1900s. It was swiftly confiscated by local officials and never surfaced again. Rumors say the final page reads, "He must sleep until silence becomes stone." You kneel beside the box. There's no key, no clasp, just the string. You shouldn't untie it. Every instinct screams no. So, of course, your fingers start working the knots loose. The string comes away easily. Too easily. Like it's been waiting for you. The box opens. Inside is a scroll. Wrapped around, nothing. Just empty air. But the scroll floats. Lifts gently as though pulled upward by memory itself. You take it, unroll it. The characters are fresh. Ink so dark it looks wet. You read, "I ruled, I raged, I built forever, and yet I do not know if I was real." The breath in the tunnel changes, grows colder, sharper. You hear a soft laugh, not mocking, not evil, just tired. You turn. Someone stands behind you now. He looks like any old man. Robes, faded beard, uneven skin, parchment thin. His eyes, though they carry centuries, Do you know what immortality really is? He asks. You manage to shake your head. It's not living forever. It's being remembered wrong. He smiles. They called me tyrant, genius, demon, God. And not once did they get it right. You try to speak. He raises a hand. I'm not here. Not really. I'm just what's left when the story won't let go. Historians still argue whether Qin Shi Huang's obsession with immortality was sincere or symbolic. Some claim it masked a deeper dread not of death, but of misunderstanding, of being remembered for the wrong reasons, or worse, being remembered without meaning. The old man turns, walking slowly around the chamber, brushing the silken walls. Every time someone digs, he says they make up a new version of me. A little louder, a little meaner, a little more convenient. You ask quietly why he's still here. He stops, looks at you. I don't know. Maybe I forgot how to leave. You hold up the scroll. What is this? He shrugs. A last thought, maybe a lie, maybe a curse, or maybe it's yours now. And then he fades. No poof, no drama. He just stops needing to be seen. The scroll crumbles in your hands, ashes soft and warm. You leave the box open, walk slowly back to the door. As you pass the silken walls, they still wave, but now in time with your breath. They're listening. You step through the door. It shuts behind you with a soft click, and you're alone again, back in the tunnel. You walk upward now, the path gentle but endless. Like the Qin's vision, eternal, unbending, and blind to its own weight. Eventually, the tunnel splits into three. Left a faint glow, middle silence. Right wind. You pick wind. The air there smells of rain moss and distance. You walk, and as you go, the tunnel narrows, then widens, then finally opens to a clearing under the sky. A real sky. Clouds finally moving. You exhale. Deep, slow. And when you do, the wind echoes your breath back to you. You look down. Your shadow stretches long, but it's not just yours. It's joined. Another shadow beside you, perfectly in sync. Then it fades, and you're whole again. Not haunted, not chosen, just awake. You sit in the clearing for a while, letting your heart settle into a slower rhythm. The moss beneath you is cool and thick, and the wind teases the grass with that soft, hushing sound that always makes you feel like the earth itself is breathing. For the first time in what feels like forever, there's no urgency, no whispers, no footsteps chasing you down a hall of history. Just you, and the strange fact that you've seen the Qin Emperor, or some memory of him. You lie back, watching the clouds drift across the sky. They look like ink blots smeared across parchment. The sort of clouds that make you think about questions without answers. Like, if an emperor lives on in stories, is he still alive? And if a dynasty dies but its rules and roads remain, did it ever really end? Mainstream fact time, though. The Qin Dynasty only officially lasted from 221 to 206 BCE. Its influence outlived it by millennia. The standardized script measurements and centralized bureaucracy formed the bedrock for nearly every dynasty that followed. Some scholars even argue that modern China is more Qin than Han, more about the system than the stories. You close your eyes. Somewhere nearby, a bird trills. Then another answers in a slightly different pitch, like they're tuning themselves to a forgotten song. The wind carries a smell, now wood smoke faint and dry. You sit up slowly. There, at the far edge of the clearing, is a structure you didn't see before. A pavilion, sloped roof. Red, lacquered beams peeled gray by time. It shouldn't be there. But then again, neither should you. You walk toward it, steps quiet, the grass muffling each footfall. As you approach, you see someone inside. She's seated, cross-legged head, bowed fingers moving rhythmically across a long zither the guqin. The sound is fragile, like it might dissolve if you listen too hard. Just 7 strings, but they echo like 70. You step into the pavilion's shade. She doesn't look up, but speaks. You brought the silence with you. Good. You wait. Still playing, she continues. Most people bring noise. Questions. The kind that break things. But not you. You finally speak. Who are you? A pause. A plucked harmonic lingers like incense smoke. I'm what's left when something beautiful refuses to be forgotten. Okay, cryptic musical spirit. Sure, you sit. Is this still the Qin Dynasty? She laughs softly. Isn't it always? She finishes the phrase and lets her hands rest. You've heard the emperors and their tombs, the stones and the swords. But have you heard the stories they tried to erase? Quirky tidbit, incoming, buried deep in local folklore, are tales of women who whispered truths into the emperor's ears, not concubines, but scribes, trained not just in writing, but in memory. According to legend, these silent sisters carried records not on paper, but in perfect recitation. They vanished when the dynasty fell. No graves, no scrolls, just vanished. She looks at you now. Her eyes are ancient but not old. They called us fiction. Convenient. Pretty lies. But we remembered the parts they wanted to forget. You lean in, curiosity coiling around your spine. Like what? She smiles. Like the failed elixir. The what now? The emperor drank something. Not mercury. Not jade dust. Something else. Something made from a fungus found only beneath the southern mountains. It didn't grant immortality. It fragmented him. You blink. Fragmented. She gestures at the air between you. Scattered. Like glass dropped on tile. Some pieces stayed in his bones. Others in scrolls. One in a dream. One in a statue. And one. She touches her chest. In the music, historians still debate whether the first emperor truly consumed mercury in his quest for eternal life. Some records suggest it. Others imply it was a cover story for deeper experiments, early alchemical rites that were far more esoteric than medicinal. Some modern researchers whisper about the fragmentation theory, a fringe idea that he succeeded not in preserving his body, but in embedding parts of himself into objects, places, even memories. You suddenly realize how many strange things you've seen. The jade statue, the stitched box, the scroll that spoke, the breathing walls, fragments. You ask her, what happens if they come back together? She looks toward the sky. I don't know. Maybe he wakes. Maybe he weeps. Maybe he rewrites everything. You feel a chill skate down your spine. Is someone trying to put him back together? She nods slowly. The archivists. That's what they call themselves now. They don't wear robes. They don't carry spears. Just computers, lasers, and translation software. They think if they decode enough, extract enough. She stops. You wait. Finally, she finishes. They'll never find the last piece, because it's not in a temple. You ask where it is. She looks you dead in the eye. It's in choice. His dream only works if someone says yes. You sit back, that loose marble of dread rolling around again in your head. You think of the old man near the wall, of Crab, of the whisper under the floorboards. You've been nudged, guided, maybe even chosen. But you haven't agreed. Not yet. Can I say no? Her smile softens. That's the most Qin thing you could do. She resumes playing. The notes float again, this time like dust motes in sunlight. You close your eyes, listen, and somewhere within the layers of harmony, you hear a voice. Not hers, not yours, but familiar. I built a world without trust. I see that now. You open your eyes. The pavilion is empty. No Guqin, no woman, just you, and a single black stone left where she sat, carved with the word listen. You pocket it. Gently, like a promise, you walk again. The path has reformed. Smooth stone now winding down through forest speckled with sunlight. Leaves whisper above. The kind of whisper that means you've been seen, but you're safe. And that's when you realize maybe this journey was never about what was buried. Maybe it was about what survived. The stone path narrows its edges, lost beneath creeping moss and fallen leaves, as if nature itself is politely reclaiming what the Qin once imposed. You walk slowly, each footfall whispering against the dampness, and your mind loops that final word carved into the black stone. Listen. It echoes more deeply than you'd expect. Not like a command, more like an invitation. And now everything around you seems to hum with hidden meaning. A breeze isn't just a breeze anymore, it's a message. The creak of the trees, the low burble of a stream nearby, even the distant beat of a bird's wings, they all feel strangely aware. Mainstream historical fact. The Qin Dynasty didn't just unify laws and roads, they tried to standardize sound. That's right. Emperor Qin Shi Huang mandated the use of official musical instruments tuned to a single pitch standard. Harmony wasn't just a value, it was law. One pitch, one rhythm, one empire. You follow the sound of that stream. It grows louder with each step, and soon you come to a small bridge, worn smooth from centuries of nothing but time. The stream below is shallow, the stones beneath visible and familiar, those same gray ochre tones you saw in the tomb tiles. But here, they're weathered, peaceful. There's someone already standing on the bridge. Of course there is. A child, maybe 10 years old, facing away from you, peering down into the water. You hesitate. And then, carefully, you step onto the bridge beside them. They don't move. You glance down. The child is dropping small white pebbles into the stream one by one. Plop, plop, plop. After the fifth pebble, they speak. He didn't mean to scare everyone. Their voice is soft even. Not childlike, not adult. You reply without asking who they mean. I know. They nod, still focused on the water. But he didn't stop either. You say nothing. Because what do you say to that? Plop? I'm not supposed to be here, they add. But I snuck in. Through a book. You glance at them. Their clothes are modern. Hoodie. Sneakers. But in their other hand, tucked close to the body like a secret, an old scroll wrapped in clear plastic. Fringe tidbit alert in 1987. A rare book collector in Suzhou claimed to have a scroll transcribed by a Qin servant, who described the Boy of Mirrors, a being that appeared in reflections near the imperial court. Said to be neither ghost nor god, but something else. The scroll was dismissed as apocryphal, until it disappeared from the archive 3 years later. You kneel beside the child. Why are you here? They finally look at you, and their eyes, they shimmer like still water. I'm here to ask if you're going to help him. You blink. Help who? The Emperor. He's broken. Someone has to either fix him or bury him deeper. You sit down right on the bridge. It's that kind of moment. Is that why I'm here? The child shrugs. You're the only one who's made it this far without losing the thread. You glance down at the stream where a particularly round pebble is rolling slowly along the current. And what happens if I choose not to do either? They smile. Then the story waits for someone else. That chill again. The idea that stories aren't just things we tell, but things that use us if we don't pay attention. Historians still argue whether Qin Shi Huang ever feared legacy more than mortality. Was his drive for unity about eternal peace, or erasing all alternatives to his version of the truth? Some claim his obsession with unifying everything, weights, laws, roads, even thoughts, was an act of ultimate loneliness. Because what is uniformity if not a defense against disagreement? The child holds out a final pebble to you. White, smooth, cool in your palm. If you drop this one, something will change. You hesitate. Then slowly you let it fall. Plop. The water flares for a moment. Yes, flares like moonlight suddenly sharpened. Then it's gone. You and the child sit in silence. A moment passed. A choice made. But nothing obvious has changed. Yet, the child stands. You'll want to find the mirror garden next. Of course, there's a mirror garden. Where? They point downstream. Follow the sound that doesn't echo. You watch them walk off the bridge and into the forest. No path, no trail, just gone. You sit for a few more breaths, absorbing the stillness. Then, reluctantly, you rise. You follow the stream. And now you're listening differently. Not for the sound itself, but for the absence of echo. A few birds chirp overhead. Their calls bounce. The water rushes softly. That echoes too. But then you hear something else. A low chime, like a bell rung underwater. It doesn't echo, not even a whisper. You follow it. The forest changes as you go. The trees lean inward. Bark, pale leaves, translucent. You pass under hanging vines, some covered in script characters that fade as soon as you glance at them directly. Then the trees stop. You step into a clearing made entirely of glass. Not mirrors, glass, walls, floor. Even the trees here are shaped from some hardened translucent crystal. Light bends in strange angles. You see yourself 1,000 times, but always just out of sync. A hand moves a second too late. A blink that doesn't match. A shadow that forgets to follow. You're in the mirror garden. You step carefully. At the center of the space is a circle of broken glass benches. Shattered. As though something too heavy tried to sit on history and cracked it. You approach the center. There, suspended in midair, is a drop of ink. Not falling, not frozen, just hovering. It pulses once as you near, then splashes into the air, forming a word. Return. Another pulse, or rewrite. You reach toward the floating ink, and the world around you bends. Not breaks, bends like hot metal before the strike. Your reflection finally matches you, and it smiles. Not your smile, something colder, older. Then it vanishes. You're alone again, just the sound of your breath, and that single silent chime. You stand motionless, hand still extended into the quiet hum of air where the floating ink once lingered. That silent chime echoes again, or rather doesn't. It swells like a breath held too long, pressing into your chest, and then vanishes. No echo, just space. You lower your arm. Something in you has changed. You're not sure what, but you feel it behind the eyes, humming gently like the flicker of a light bulb warming up. You look around the mirror garden. It's still dazzling in its surreal precision, your reflection multiplied. Tilted, paused mid-step or mid-blink. Each version just a beat off. Then they all move in unison. One blink, one breath, one nod, and you walk forward. Your foot touches something new. Not glass, not earth, a tiled floor. As you move ahead, the garden collapses in on itself quietly like a folding fan, closing until you're walking a wide corridor lit by unseen light. The walls smooth as inkstones, the floor traced with silver characters. You're deep underground again, back in the bones of the empire. But something's different now. The air is thicker, charged. You walk for what could be moments or hours. Time has lost its bite until you reach a chamber. It's circular, wide as a planetarium, and filled with statues. But not just any statues. These are of the emperor, hundreds of him, each slightly different. In one, he's young, wide-eyed. In another, middle-aged, solemn. In yet another, ancient and skeletal jaw clenched tight. You walk among them. Each has a plaque, but not names, emotions. Doubt, fury, grief, hope. Mainstream history says Qin Shi Huang was obsessed with controlling his image. He commissioned dozens of likenesses, burned others, and had sculptors executed for dishonest cheekbones. Okay, we made up the cheekbone part, but he was serious about managing his face across the empire. But this is something else. Each version of him cataloged by feeling. You pause in front of one simply labeled loneliness. It's the only one sitting, head in hands, robes undone. No crown. You sit down across from it, and you wait. The longer you sit, the more you feel the room. Soften. The silver script on the floor pulses faintly, almost like breath. And something ancient presses against the edges of your thoughts. Then, like a whisper, just beyond comprehension, you hear it. Do you think I wanted to live forever? You don't answer aloud. It doesn't seem necessary. Another whisper. They promised unity. They gave me silence. It's coming from the statue. You lean forward. I only wanted to be understood. Fringe tidbit. A few fringe historians have proposed that buried in the lowest tier of the emperor's tomb, deeper than even the terracotta army, there's a chamber that holds not treasure or weapons, but a recording. Not written, not visual. Something closer to a psychic imprint. A final confession stored in resonance patterns and encoded stone. Of course, it's never been found. Or, if it has no one saying, you whisper back, I don't think you're a monster. The silence that follows is enormous, not empty, just holding something, like a breath. Then the statue shifts, only slightly, a twitch of a finger. You don't scream, but you do blink a lot. The figure lifts its head. It doesn't speak. But a tear of mercury rolls from one stone eye, tracing down the cheek and vanishing into the floor with a hiss. The other statues turn to face you, all at once, not threateningly. More like they've finally noticed you. A beam of light descends from above, illuminating the center of the chamber. In it a scroll, suspended in midair, its edges frayed, its ribbon undone. You walk toward it. Historians still argue whether the emperor ever wrote anything personal. His official decrees were always transcribed by scribes sealed in jade tubes and carried by imperial runners. But some whisper of a single scroll written by the emperor himself. One not meant for the court. A private thought. A buried truth. You reach out and touch the scroll. The room explodes, not with force, with memory. You're somewhere else, standing on the Great Wall. It's mid-construction. Dust everywhere. The air thick with labor and curses and the clang of metal. You see workers hauling bricks, soldiers shouting. And there, in the distance, you see him, Qin Shi Huang, watching, silent, stone-faced. His robes dark against the pale sky. He turns and walks straight toward you. You try to move. You can't. He stops inches away. You can see the lines carved into his face, the strange glint in his eyes. A man who's carried too many futures and seen too few outcomes. He raises a hand and places it gently on your shoulder. Would you have done it differently? He asks. You don't speak. You can't. He continues. They say I buried scholars, burned books. Maybe. Maybe I buried fear. Maybe I burned lies. Or maybe I was just afraid of being forgotten. Another tear of mercury slips from his eye. He lets go, and everything fades. You're back in the statue chamber. But the scroll is gone. In your hands now a black ribbon. On it embroidered in silver legacy is louder than truth. You pocket it. Carefully, you have a growing collection of impossible things. The chamber's walls begin to shift, spiral, open, and once again a path forms. But it's not a hallway. It's a staircase. You ascend. Each step lights as you touch it. The script along the walls pulses gently. No whispers now. Just your breath and the steady rise of stone underfoot. You're climbing toward something. You don't know what. But for the first time, you're not afraid of it. The staircase coils like a nautilus shell, tight at first, then widening as you rise, the walls blooming outward. The light softens, as if dawn has decided to appear underground just for you. Each step feels warmer, more certain, and the air takes on a slight fragrance, sandalwood, and something like old parchment soaked in stars. Your footsteps don't echo here. You're past echoing. Eventually, the steps stop, and you arrive at a round platform. Floating above it is an enormous bronze ring about the size of a yurt. It turns slowly, noiselessly, suspended by nothing. Inside its orbit is a chair, no a throne but minimalist, worn smooth by time and possibly regret. And surrounding it, arranged in a perfect circle on the floor, are hundreds of tiny objects. Hairpins, coins, shoes, letters, marbles, all impossibly old, all oddly intimate. You take a cautious step forward. The bronze ring pulses softly, a deep, bassy thrum in your chest. This chamber is not for ceremony. It's not a tomb. It's not a trap. It's a memory palace. One of the emperor's maybe, or yours. You walk around the edge of the circle, peering down at the objects. Each one gives off a faint shimmer, like it wants to be touched, but not yet. You squat beside a tiny wooden horse, only to realize it's carved from peach wood and worn from being held too often by small fingers. It smells like a bedtime story, a mainstream historical fact. Qin Shi Huang was terrified of forgetting. He didn't just archive laws, he collected dreams, no joke. His court kept dream recorders, low-level scribes who wrote down noble and royal dreams and filed them into the central archive. Yes, that included his own. Entire scrolls filled with nonsensical, surreal fragments of half-sleep thoughts filed under imperial headings. It was said he believed dreams were divine reminders of what the waking mind tried to ignore. You stand and move to the throne, but instead of sitting, you rest a hand on its back. It's warm. You suddenly hear voices, not around you, inside you. Whispers, arguments, laughter, a debate without end. You hear the dynasty must live forever, and also it is not meant to. Then build the tomb deeper, and the tomb is the body. Historians still argue whether the emperor saw his tomb as a symbolic realm or an actual afterlife staging ground. Some say he intended to wake in it like a king in a spaceship surrounded by his warriors ready to reconquer. Others say it was a prison built by a man who realized too late that he had no heaven waiting, so he tried to forge one underground. You look up. The bronze ring slows its orbit, then stops. A voice speaks not aloud, but in the very pressure of the air. Choose one. You're confused. One what? Then you notice one of the objects is pulsing, a tiny jade seal. You kneel beside it, engraved with a name you almost but don't recognize. You hesitate, then pick it up. The chamber flares with golden light, and you are somewhere else again. You're back on the wall, but this time it's snowing. Silent, heavy snow. The kind that blankets sound and time alike. You see the Emperor again, but he's older this time. Leaner. Worn. He doesn't see you. He's talking to a child. A son? Maybe. The boy looks scared. His feet are bare on the cold stone, but he doesn't flinch. The Emperor kneels and offers the seal. This means everything, he says. And nothing. The boy asks, "Will I be like you?" The Emperor's expression twists. Not cruel. Just tired. No, I hope not. Fringe tidbit. There are whispers. Oh, the delicious whispers that the first emperor had more than one heir, and that a quiet son existed. A child whose name was wiped from records, trained not in war but in memory. Supposedly, this son was tasked with maintaining a secret archive of dreams and forbidden texts in the depths of the empire, away from the politics of succession. The theory that this child became the keeper of the emperor's soul, not biologically, but spiritually. Yeah, it's wild. But here you are in the middle of wild. Back in the chamber, the seal is still in your hand. You hear the voice again. If you carry this forward, the story becomes yours. You glance at the throne. It's empty again, but the ring has started spinning in reverse. Or you can set it down, let it go, and leave. The choice isn't forced. You feel no compulsion, just invitation. You kneel, set the seal gently back where it came from. The chamber doesn't react, which is maybe the point. You walk to the edge of the circle where a small door has appeared, just tall enough to crouch through. A low corridor behind it, pulsing with amber light. You step through, and immediately you feel air, real air, cool and moving. You're nearing the surface. You move faster now. Your steps feel lighter. You're no longer being pulled by curiosity, but by completion. There's something up ahead you're finally ready to meet. A ramp curls upward, the walls now marked with thin metal veins, silver and copper, pulsing gently like capillaries. And then you see it. An opening, circular, the size of a giant's eye, and beyond it sky, actual sky. You step out into the open, and everything is silent. You're in a garden, but not the mirror garden. This is older, wilder, the kind of place that existed before emperors, before scrolls, before thought had shape. Trees loom like ancient sentinels, their bark etched with unintelligible symbols. Birds flutter overhead, species you've never seen before and will likely never see again. The air smells like wet stone and memory. At the center of the garden, a pool, black as ink, still as glass, and at its edge a man. He wears no crown, no robes, just a plain tunic. His hair is long, gray. His eyes are closed. You walk to the edge and sit beside him. Neither of you speaks, not at first. Finally, he opens one eye and smiles. You made it. You nod. He gestures to the pool. It's not deep, but it reflects more than it should. You look, you see yourself, but also not. You see the path you've taken, the choices, the strange child, the whispers, the scrolls, the statues tear. You see that you're not just a visitor here. You've become part of the story. You lean closer, and for the first time, your reflection nods back at you, of its own accord, then vanishes. You look to the man, but he's gone. Just his footprints in the moss already fading. And you're alone again, but not lonely. The wind stirs, the leaves whisper, and you rise. You walk slowly now, not out of weariness, but reverence. The air has changed. Lighter, softer, as if even gravity is giving you some grace for making it this far. The garden stretches in every direction, but you follow the path of least resistance winding between mossy stones and towering pines. There are no signs, no guardians, no symbols, just you, and ahead something glints in the underbrush. You stoop. It's a comb, simple, wooden, worn smooth by years of use. You turn it over in your hand. On the back is a tiny carving a rabbit. Not fierce, just curled into sleep, as if it once belonged to someone who needed comfort more than conquest. Fringe tidbit. In one of the lesser-known folk tales attributed to the Qin Dynasty, there's mention of an emperor's concubine who kept a pet rabbit and used its image as her secret signature on notes passed within the palace. Her existence isn't recorded officially, but graffiti on a wall fragment unearthed in a worker's barracks showed a woman cradling a rabbit, captioned with the phrase, "She knew too much to speak." The implication, not all influence wore crowns. You tuck the comb into your sleeve. Another relic, another story. The path narrows, shrinks to a tunnel of vines and shade. You pass through. On the other side, a pavilion, ancient, slanted, its beams carved with constellations. And in its center, hovering just above the stone floor, is a cube of glass, perfectly still. Inside it, a city, a miniature replica. Wait, no, it's moving. You lean in. You recognize the layout, the palaces, the river, the walls. This is Xianyang, the Qin capital rebuilt inside glass preserved in time like a snow globe from 220 BCE. You watch as tiny figures bustle through the streets. Markets flourish. Soldiers march. Courtiers strut in stiff robes. It's so detailed, you almost forget it isn't alive. Then you see him, the emperor. Tiny, yes, but distinct. He's standing on a balcony, watching over it all. Then you blink, and now he's gone. You turn to leave, but something holds you. A small voice inside says, "Stay a moment longer." So you do, and slowly the cube begins to change. The city within crumbles. Walls fall. Fires bloom. Figures scatter. You're witnessing its fall in fast motion. You hear nothing, but you feel it. The unraveling. The forgetting. And then all that's left inside the cube is a single tree, the kind from the garden outside. Historians still argue whether Xianyang was truly erased by the Han to obliterate the Qin legacy, or whether its records were lost simply to time. Some claim the bones of the city are still beneath the modern landscape, humming with stories that refuse to stay buried. You turn from the cube unsettled, but not afraid. The pavilion begins to dissolve behind you beams, disintegrating into dust. Not a punishment, just time doing its thing. You step onto another path, this one paved with mismatched stones, like fragments of a memory road. Each step lands with a faint tone, a note. You realize you're walking a melody. The path of echoes, maybe. At first it's random, then rhythmic, then undeniably familiar. It's the lullaby from earlier, the one that sang itself into your ears when you touched that statue's tear. You hum along, not consciously. Your body knows the tune better than your mind, and just like that you arrive. A new chamber opens before you, Unlike the others, this one isn't grand. No statues, no relics, just a scroll, suspended mid-air, glowing faintly. You approach. Your fingers barely brush its surface before it unfurls, not outward, but inward. You're pulled into its ink, and suddenly you're standing inside a library. Not any library, his library, the forbidden one. Row upon row of scrolls, each labeled in meticulous calligraphy, each buzzing with potential. You walk the aisles, history, philosophy, dreams, edicts, punishments, love letters, apologies, recipes. Yes, one labeled soup for sadness. You open one scroll. It contains a letter, not written to an official, but to a child. It reads, "When you remember me, remember the silence I carried." It was heavier than the sword. Another scroll. To build unity, I gave them one language. But in doing so, I lost the right to speak my own truth. Another, I was afraid of the stars. Not because they judged me, but because they never looked away. Mainstream history tells us that Qin Shi Huang, standardized weights, measures roads, even language. But here within this intimate archive, you see the cost, the weight behind that unity. A man who exchanged chaos for order, but found that peace doesn't always follow. You reach a final scroll. It has no title, only a single mark, a fingerprint. You press yours against it, and for the briefest moment you see it all. The boy he was, the empire he built, the lives that fell in its shadow, the dream of immortality crumbling like sugar in rain. And then it's gone. You're back outside the library. The scroll returns to its place in the air, then fades. You step forward, a soft chime. The path ahead opens, not grand, just wide, inviting. You walk forward your steps softer now, not because you're tired, but because you understand this was never about secrets. It was about seeing the man behind the myth and choosing to carry his story with care, not as a monument, but as a whisper. You walk the widening path, still feeling the whisper of scroll ink on your fingertips. It's as if the entire journey has finally settled in your bones, less like a story you've heard, more like one you've remembered. A memory that wasn't quite yours until now. The sky above has shifted. It's dusk, somehow. Pale gold folds into lavender. The kind of light that makes everything soft-edged, dreamlike. The hush before the hush. You're approaching a courtyard, but not one of grandeur. This one is modest, almost humble. The kind of place you'd sip tea at sunrise if you'd just given up being emperor and picked up gardening. It's quiet. You step into the space noticing a single chair. Not a throne, not carved. Just a simple wooden stool beneath an awning of woven reeds. A teapot rests on a stone beside it. Steam curls from the spout. Someone was just here, or maybe they always are. You glance around and realize this is the same courtyard from the mural back in the palace, the one half-sketched and abandoned in haste. Except here, it's finished. Real. It's been waiting. A leaf flutters down and lands on your shoulder. You don't brush it off. You sit, not on the stool, but cross-legged in the dirt. You've been walking through marble, iron, jade, and glass. Now, just earth. And it feels perfect. The teapot bubbles gently. No one pours it for you. But a small chipped cup sits beside it. You help yourself. The tea is warm, bitter, and faintly sweet like everything you've just seen. A small wind moves through the trees, and you hear it again. Not a voice this time, a hum, the melody, that lullaby. But not from the path or the cube or the statue. It's in your chest now, like it never left. You hum along, and the ground beneath you seems to hum back. Then you see something in the dirt, carved carefully like someone had been doodling with a twig. A turtle, surrounded by waves. Mainstream historical fact. The turtle was one of the 4 celestial beasts of ancient Chinese cosmology, representing the North Winter and longevity. It was also the animal most associated with oracles. The plastrons of turtles were among the earliest mediums used to divine fate. Qin ancestors, long before unification, carved their future into these shells. It's fitting that here, at the quiet end of the labyrinth, a turtle waits again. You brush the carving lightly, and under the turtle more symbols, words, but not written for reading, written to remember. You close your eyes and see flashes. The emperor, as a young boy, hiding from storms in a library's crawlspace. A soldier weeping over a cracked sword. A scholar burning his own poetry before the censors could take it. A gardener folding paper cranes from forbidden scrolls. Fringe tidbit. One unearthed Qin grave, long dismissed as belonging to a low-ranking attendant, contained not bones, but thousands of tiny paper cranes folded from ancient legal documents. Some archaeologists believe this was a silent protest from a forgotten scholar who refused to let the regime's cold edicts be his only legacy. Others argue it was simply ritual burial art. But that grave, it's since been resealed untouched, almost reverently. You open your eyes. The courtyard is fading, not in a scary way, more like the edges are dissolving into stardust. You blink, and the stars are no longer up. They're around you. You're floating now, still seated, still calm, as if the universe decided to cradle you for a bit. The stars shimmer in familiar shapes. You recognize constellations, but rearranged. They form the wall, then the tomb, then the emperor's face, then yours, and then they fade into nothing but pinpricks again. Historians still argue whether Qin Shi Huang's quest for immortality was truly about fear of death or a desperate need to be understood. Perhaps he didn't want to live forever so much as he wanted his story to, but he controlled it so tightly he accidentally made it harder to hold. Until now, you drift gently downward, back to Earth, and find yourself in a final chamber. This one carved from light itself. Nothing solid, just suggestion. You walk across an invisible floor. At the center stands a pillar of water. Yes, water. Suspended vertically. Turning slowly like a liquid mirror. You approach, and for the first time you don't see yourself. You see a library, but it's not the emperor's. It's yours. Scrolls, memories, laughter, dreams, regrets, all waiting to be cataloged, not by force, not to control, but to preserve. You reach toward the water, touch it, and it ripples. One word forms in the center. Remember. That's it. No royal decree, no prophecy, just a gentle command. You step back, and the world begins to soften again. Edges blur, colors melt. You feel yourself descending not down, but into sleep, into stillness, into the part of your mind where dreams and stories wrap around each other like vines on an old temple wall. One last image, a single candle flickering on a windowsill in Xianyang. Someone has lit it for you to guide you home, and with that, you exhale. Your exhale drifts like silk through the chamber, and the world responds not with thunder, not with revelation, but with a hush. A long, loving hush, as though the story itself is sighing in relief, glad to finally be heard. You are standing in a field now. Not in a palace or a tomb, or even a dream space, but a real, unadorned open field. the kind the emperor might have marched through before he knew the word emperor even existed. There are grasses swaying, tall, dry stalks that hiss softly in the breeze. A few dragonflies bob lazily in the fading golden light. You walk forward slow, barefoot now. There's no need for the weight of boots or armor or expectation. A hill rises gently ahead. You climb it without urgency, feeling each step press into the earth beneath you. At the top, no shrine, no gate, just a stone. It's flat, smooth, clearly placed with care. On its surface, carved characters so weathered they're nearly lost. But somehow you don't need to read them. You already know what they say, not because you studied them, because you lived them. Mainstream fact. No definitive resting place for the emperor has ever been excavated. The mausoleum remains sealed untouched, encased beneath a man-made hill near Cheyenne. Buried chambers are believed to contain rivers of mercury and constellations of gems above a celestial map forever hidden. Still, no one's dared open it. Part out of reverence, part out of fear. Yet here you are, atop his story. And instead of secrets, what you find is peace. The grass around you rustles. You sit, letting the wind comb through your hair. A bird cries in the distance, not mournful, just marking the moment. And then you feel something beside you. You glance over. Not a ghost, not a soldier, just a figure. Familiar, but not quite nameable. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. You both just sit, quiet, watching the sun fold into the land. Maybe it's him. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's everyone who ever tried too hard to be remembered. And maybe it doesn't matter. The hill is warm beneath you, the breeze a steady rhythm, and just like that, the layers start to slip away. The armor, the crown, the scrolls, the fear, the name. Just you now, breathing, blinking slowly, feeling the hush turn into something heavier, sleepier. The stars start to blink back into the sky, not one at a time, more like they've been waiting behind a veil, and now someone's pulled it back. You lie down, letting the hill cradle you like a child, and you remember one last thing, that lullaby. It comes again, not from outside, from inside, a song older than nations, older than walls, older than power. And in it you hear a promise, not of immortality, but of rest, long, deep, true rest. You close your eyes. The stars continue to shimmer. The grasses continue to sway, and the world finally lets you sleep. The breeze grows slower now, like the world itself is taking a long, final breath for the evening. The stars above shift gently soft, white light, filtering through the sky like sand falling underwater. No rush, no noise. You're not walking anymore. You're floating in a calm sea of memory where time doesn't tick, but stretches like warm honey across the quiet landscape. Everything that once seemed heavy, empires, crowns, forgotten scrolls, is now featherlight drifting behind you like autumn leaves on a pond. You feel no need to hold on. You've seen what mattered. And it's not the gold or the jade. It's the moments, the quiet cups of tea, the secret lullabies, the carved turtles and paper cranes. As you breathe in, the air smells like old books and new rain. As you breathe out, you feel your limbs loosen, every muscle untangling like threads unraveling from a dream. There's no more path to follow, no more chambers to explore. You've reached the quietest part of the night, the gentle center where stories end not with a bang, but with a whisper. Your thoughts drift slower now, less like sentences, more like echoes. And as the hush settles deeper, you realize you are safe. you are warm. And the world is still turning, but it doesn't need you to do anything more. Let it all go now. The Emperor can rest. So can you. Sleep well. End of script. Sweet dreams.